Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies. As we continue with part 4 of the Hiram Abiff Series, Lost in Translation, on the nomenclature of the name Hiram Abiff. Anon, Agon, Ajunon, and Don are all used in the old manuscripts for one whom they call the son of the king of Tyre, but it is evidently meant for Hiram Abiff. Each of these words is most probably a corruption of the Hebrew Adon or Lord, so that the reference would clearly be to Adon, Hiram, or Adoniram, with whom Hiram was often confounded, a confusion to be found in later times in the Adon-Hiramite Rite. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Hiram was a mythical figure, who was the brilliant builder of the temple, haloed by glory and talent. He is a synthesis of two biblical figures, Huram or Hiram Abiff, and Aduram, Adon-Hiram or Adoniram. But one party called him Hiram Abiff, and the other, admitting that his original name was Hiram, supposed that, in consequence of the skill he had displayed in the construction of the temple, he had received the honorable affix of Adon, signifying Lord or Master, whence his name became Adoniram. Usually known as Hiram Abiff, or probably more accurately, Adoniram. Adoniram is manifestly derived from Adonah, the Hebrew word for Lord, in much the same way that Kaiser and Tsar are derived from Caesar. Hiram Abiff is a variation of the name Hiram Abiff. Albert Pike mentions several forms of the name, which can be seen here. The latter ending in the sacred Hindu monosyllable Om, which may also be extracted from the names of the three murderers. Pike further relates the three ruffians to a triad of stars in the constellation of Libra, and also calls attention to the fact that the Chaldean god, Bel, metamorphosed into a demon by the Jews, appears in the names of each of the murderers, Jabelah, Jabalo, Jabalam. The name Hiram is taken from the Chaldean Chiram. Both in Hebrew and in Masonry, in the name Hiram Abiff, spelled also in scriptures as Huram and Shiram Abiff. Hiram Abiff has precisely the same meaning as Pythagoras, the father-teacher, or alternatively, the teacher from the father. The Egyptian form of the name Hiram is Hermes, the teacher of the secret or hermetic science and wisdom, and the student is strongly urged to study those two important ancient treatises of initiation science, the divine Pomander of Hermes and the shepherd of Hermas. In the word hermaphrodite, a word invented by the old philosophers, we find Hermes changed to Herm, signifying Chiron, or the universal agent, and Aphrodite, the passive principle of humidity, who is also called Venus, and is said to have been produced and generated by the sea. We also read that Hiram, or Chiron, or the universal agent, assisted King Solomon to build the temple. No doubt as Solomon possessed wisdom, he understood what to do with the corporalized universal agent. The Talmud of the Jews says that King Solomon built the temple by the assistance of Shamir. Now this word signifies the sun, which is perpetually collecting the omnipresence surrounding electrical fire, or spiritus mundi, and sending it to us in the planets in a visible manner called light. The original word seen here, Chiram, is a radical word consisting of these three consonants, i.e., Chech, Resh, and Mim. Chech signifies Chama, the sun's light, i.e., the universal, invisible, cold fire of nature, attracted by the sun, manifested into light and sent down to us and to every planetary body belonging to the solar system. Resh signifies Ruah, i.e., spirit, air, wind, as being the vehicle which conveys and collects the light into numberless foci. Within the solar rays of light are agitated by a circular motion and manifested in heat and burning fire. Mim signifies Majim, water, humidity, but rather the mother of water, i.e., radical humidity or a particular kind of condensed air. The three constitute the universal agent or fire of nature in one word. Chiram, not Hiram. Chiram is a word composed of three words, denoting the universal spirit, the essence whereof the whole creation does exist, and the object of Chaldean, Egyptian, and genuine natural philosophy, according to its inner principles or properties. The three Hebrew words, Chama, Ruah, and Majim, mean respectively fire, air, and water, while their initial consonants, Cha, R, M, give us Chiram, that invisible essence which is the father of earth, fire, air, and water, because, although immaterial in its own invisible nature, as the unmoved and electrical fire, when moved it becomes light and visible, and when collected and agitated, becomes heat and visible and tangible fire, and when associated with humidity, it becomes material. The word Chiram has been metamorphosed into Hermes and also into Herman, and the translators of the Bible have made Chiram by changing Chet into he, both of these Hebrew word signs being very similar. The legend and traditions of Hiram Abiff, for such is the rendering of the Hebrew text in Luther's Bible, from the consummation of the connecting links between Freemasonry and the ancient mysteries, and sustains beyond peradventure the theory that Freemasonry dates anterior to the deluge and the strong probability of its divine origin. We do not assert that the legend of Hiram Abiff is true. We only know that it has come to us by tradition. At what time the legend of the death of Hiram Abiff took the place of the older legends in the mysteries of Persia, India, Egypt, etc., we have no information, nor is it important for us to know, for Masonry is a succession of allegories, the mere vehicles of great lessons in morality and philosophy. The Masonic legend stands by itself, unsupported by history or other than its own traditions. Yet we readily recognize in Hiram Abiff one of the Grand Masters of Freemasons, the Osiris of the Egyptians, the Mithra of the Persians, the Bacchus of the Greeks, the Dionysius of the fraternity of artificers, and the Atys of the Phrygians, whose passion and resurrection were celebrated by these people respectively. For many ages and everywhere, Masons have celebrated the death of Hiram Abiff. That event, therefore, interests the whole world and no particular sect, order, or coterie. It belongs to no particular time, religion, or people. Everywhere among the ancient nations there existed a similar allegory, and all must refer to the same great primitive fact. That fact we believe to have been the murder of Abel by his brother Cain. In the formation of the Masonic degrees, many of the customs of the ancient mysteries were adopted. The third, or master's degree, based upon the Hiram legend, came into use about 1723. In fact, the whole degree system was the work of the Reconstructionists. We see thus that the story of Hiram is but a variation of the ancient and universal legend, in which Osiris, Adonis, Dionysius, Balder, Hu, and many more have played the principal part. Some call Hiram a mythical symbol. This is true, but he is also a mystical symbol. There is a definite relation between Hiram and Hermes. The name Hermes is derived from Herm, a form of Hiram, the personified universal life principle, generally represented by fire. The Scandinavian worshipped Hermes under the name of Odin, the Teutons as Wotan, and certain of the Oriental peoples as Buddha or Fo. There are two theories concerning his demise. The first declares that Hermes was translated like Enoch and carried without death into the presence of God. The second states that he was buried in the valley of Hebron and a great treasure placed in his tomb, not a treasure of gold, but of books and sacred learning. HAB is an abbreviation of Hiram Abiff. Most of the Masonic documents use the initials HA for Hiram Abiff, but some of the older works refer to him as HAB. Did this mean at some point his name had been Hiram A. Biff? Tackling the French dictionaries again, the answer was found in the verb biffer, which means to strike out or eliminate. The Masonic term was not a name, but a designation. Hiram A. Biffy simply means Hiram who was eliminated. In his Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins writes, "The Rosicrucians of Germany are quite ignorant of their origin, but by tradition they suppose themselves descendants of the ancient Egyptians, Chaldeans, Magi, and Gymnasticists. The last was a name given by the followers of Alexander the Great to a caste of naked wise men whom they found meditating along the river banks in India. The consensus among these factions is that the story of Father Christian Rosicrucians, like the Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff, is an allegory and should not be considered literally." Preston, Gould, Mackey, Oliver, and Pike. In fact, nearly every great historian of Freemasonry have all recognized in the legend of Hiram Abiff an adaptation of the Osiris myth, nor do they deny that the major part of the symbolism of the craft is derived from the pagan institutions of antiquity, when the gods were venerated in secret places with strange figures and appropriate rituals. The Osiris legend, which was represented in the drama of initiation, its resemblance to the Hiramic legend of the Masonic system will be readily seen, and its symbolism will be easily understood, as the legend of Hiram Abiff is based upon the ancient Egyptian mystery ritual of the murder and resurrection of Osiris. It is natural that the sprig of acacia should be preserved as symbolic of the resurrection of Hiram. The chest containing the body of Osiris was washed ashore near Byblos and lodged in the roots of a tamarisk or acacia tree, which, growing into a mighty tree, enclosed within its trunk the body of the murdered god. This is undoubtedly the origin of the story that the sprig of acacia marks the grave of Hiram. The mystery of the evergreen marking the grave of the dead sun god is also perpetuated in the Christmas tree. Masonry ceremonies, symbols, and the celebrated legend of Hiram in the master's degree was directly borrowed from the ancient mysteries or the worship of Baal, Osiris, or Tammuz. Hiram Abiff, a master of the Dionysian artificers, the members of this society held the exclusive right throughout the Greek states of designing the temples of the gods, the houses of government, the theaters of Dionysius, and the buildings used for the public games. The resemblance between the Dionysiac legend, for instance, and the Hiramic cannot have been purely accidental. The chain that connects them is easily found in the fact that the pagan mysteries lasted until the 4th century of the Christian era and, as the fathers of the church laminated, exercised an influence over the secret societies of the Middle Ages. The Samothracian mysteries is a repetition of the story of Osiris, Bacchus, Adonis, Balder, and Hiram Abiff. The names of nearly all the great gods and saviors have been associated with either the element of fire, the solar light, or its correlate, the mystic and spiritual light invisible. Jupiter, Apollo, Hermes, Mithra, Bacchus, Dionysius, Odin, Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, Bohai, Yao, Vishnu, Shiva, Agni, Balder, Hiram Abiff, Moses, Samson, Jason, Vulcan, Uranus, Allah, Osiris, Ra, Bel, Baal, Nebo, Serapis, and King Solomon are some of the numerous deities and supermen whose symbolic attributes are derived from the manifestations of the solar power and whose names indicate their relationship to light and fire. Hiram means an ox, the symbol of the sun in Taurus, at the vernal equinox. Kuram, therefore improperly called Hiram, is Kuam, the same as Ra, Hermes, and Hercules, the Hercules Taurus Invictus, the personification of light and the sun, the mediator, redeemer, and savior. From the Egyptian word Ra came the Coptic Oro and the Hebrew Ar, light. Har-eri is Hor or Har, the chief or master. Hor is also heat, and Hora, season or hour, and hence in several African dialects as names of the sun, which can be seen here, and the like. The royal name rendered Pharaoh was Phara, that is, Pi-ra, the sun. Modern Masonry being but an imitation of ancient genuine mysteries, the writer has no design of reading into it a meaning which cannot be fully verified. For the greater part, modern Masons are dealing with symbols, the key for the real interpretation of which they never possessed, or even suspected that it existed. It remains for the future to determine whether any considerable number of our Masonic brethren really desire to possess in fuller measure the living truth which the dead letter text conceals. That living truth exists and is accessible to every Mason, as is the dead letter or the dumb show under which it masquerades in every lodge. The genuine acacia also is the thorny tamarisk, the same tree which grew up around the body of Osiris. It is a sacred tree among the Arabs, who made of it the idol, Al-Huzza, which Muhammad destroyed. It is abundant as a bush in the desert of Thur, and of it the crown of thorns was composed, which was set on the forehead of Jesus of Nazareth. It is a fit type of immortality on account of its tenacity of life, for it has been known, when planted as a doorpost, to take root and sprout out budding browse above the threshold. Mr. Singleton, 33rd degree, after describing the mystical death in the ancient mysteries, says, "The intelligent Mason will, from this, discover the origin of the rites in the 3rd degree of symbolic Masonry and the 5th and 31st degrees, ancient accepted Scottish Rite. The mysteries, in all their forms, were funeral. They celebrated the mystic death and revivification of some individual by the use of emblems, symbols, and allegorical representations. A very limited knowledge of the history of primitive worship and mysteries is necessary to enable any person to recognize in the Master Mason Hiram the Osiris of the Egyptians, the Mithra of the Persians, the Bacchus of the Greeks, the Atys of the Phrygians, of which these people celebrated the passion, death, and resurrection, as Christians celebrate today that of Jesus Christ. Otherwise, this is the eternal and unvarying type of all the religions which have succeeded each other upon the earth. Isis and Osiris, and Typhon the serpent, the Virgin, Joseph and the Christ, the story of Hiram Abiff and the three traders of all ages, St. George and the dragon, the rites of Mithra, and the Mass of the Roman Church, as well as the first presentation of all drama of all ages, races, and civilizations. You candidates may be aware that Hiram, who they have represented and personified, is ideally and precisely the same as Christ. It is Christos or Hiram, the mediator between the soul or the physical man and the universal spirit, the Father in heaven. The murder of Hiram, his burial, and his being raised again by the Master are symbols both of death, burial, and resurrection of the Redeemer, and of the death and burial in sins of the natural man, and his being raised again to a new life or born again by the direct action of the Redeemer after mortality, symbolized by the entered apprentice's grip, and philosophy, symbolized by the grip of the fellow craft, had failed to raise him. That of the Lion of the house of Judah is the strong grip, never to be broken, with which Christ of the royal line of that house has clasped to himself the whole human race, and embraces them in his wide arms as closely and affectionately as brethren embrace each other on the 5 points of fellowship. Hiram, the universal agent, might be translated Vita, the power eventually building and unfolding the bodies of man. The use and abuse of energy is the keystone to the Masonic legend. In fact, it is the key to all things in nature. Hiram, as the triple energy, one source but 3 aspects, can almost be called ether, that unknown hypothetical element which carries the impulses of the gods through the macrocosmic nervous system of the infinite. For like Hermes or Mercury, who was the messenger of the gods, ether carries impulses upon its wings. The solving of the mystery of ether, or, if you prefer to call it, vibrant space, is the great problem of Masonry. This ether, as a hypothetical medium, brings energy to the 3 bodies of thought, emotion, and action. In this manner, Hiram, the one in essence, becoming 3 in aspect, mental, emotional, and vital. The work which follows is an effect to bring to light other forgotten and neglected elements of the Masonic rites, and to emphasize the spirit of Hiram as the universal agent. The mysteries maintain their existence under the name of the cult of the greatest architect of the universe, a great name that has its origin in the allegory of Hiram, which represented in the mysteries the unknown God, the eternal and sole creator of all things and the regenerator of all beings. Masonry has a truer concept than any exoteric religion, for these religions take the symbol for the ancient mysteries, and modern Masonry things symbolized. But Masonry, in making the candidate impersonate Hiram, has preserved the original teaching. Hiram is identical with the sun gods of all nations. It is a universal glyph, for all real initiation is an internal process, a regeneration, the consummation of which is the perfect man or master, the goal of human evolution. Whatever Hiram really was, he is the type, perhaps an imaginary type to us, of humanity in its highest phase, an exemplar of what man may and should become in the course of ages, in his progress towards the realization of his destiny. An individual gifted with a glorious intellect, a noble soul, a fine organization, and a perfectly balanced moral being, an earnesty of what humanity may be and what we believe it will hereafter be in God's good time. The possibility of the race made real. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.